How are we doing, people? Thank you so much for joining me for a lesson in lean bulk. And I know it's been a short while, and this is actually going to be the last episode filmed before the launch of the school event. And it's one I've been asked about a lot of times, particularly as it's very relevant right now. We're in the middle of bulking season. It's here in the UK, it's cold, it's windy, it's rainy. The only thing to do is train and eat, so we might as well make the most of it. Now, what I experience a lot of times when I work with clients, whether it's, particularly before they've come to work with me, is they've tried bulks in the past and they've just got fat. Essentially they've seen the bulk as a green light to inhale absolutely anything that comes their way, eat, and eat even more. But, inevitably that's just going to add body fat on because there is only a certain level of muscle that you can build at a time. So what I'm going to teach you today is essentially how to go from your leanest, meanest, shreddiest physique and switch into that lean bulk so that you are packing on more muscle and storing much, much less fat. So basically, this is lean bulking for dummies. Let's get into it. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today. What is a lean bulk, first and foremost? Because, a lot of people don't actually know what a lean bulk is. And for me, it's the only real proper way to bulk, because the classic dirty bulk, you're just getting fat. You're just going, becoming like the Eddie Hall-esque caricature, big belly, flabby arms, flabby legs. Yeah, you'll be as strong as fuck, but you don't want to do that. You don't want to look like you've been eating all the mince pies over Christmas, do you? You want to come into January with those abs still in place, with that athletic physique, just building on the parts that we want to increase that size. What kind of food is best to bulk with, and how do you switch that from the dieting phase and the cutting phase to the bulking phase? How do you keep it as simple and as easy as possible? Because this is something, again, a lot of people do struggle with. Training and lifestyle, what is that supposed to look like now we're in a lean bulk? Of course, with that's going to come more flexibility. We've had to maybe be a little bit more disciplined when it comes to cutting down, particularly around food and calories. So how does that sort of change within a lean bulking phase? Number 4, bulking gone bad. So these are the common mistakes that I've seen multiple times, whether it's amongst friends, whether it's amongst people in the same gym as me, whether it's amongst clients that I have, that I've worked with and what they've done in the past. All the common mistakes, or the top common mistakes, and I'm highlighting them so that you don't become a fat mess by the end of Christmas. And finally, summary, how to bulk for the best results. So, without further ado, what is a lean bulk? Okay, so a lean bulk is essentially building muscle as lean as possible. So adding as much lean mass, muscle, as possible without gaining any or very, very little body fat. That's the idea of a lean bulk. You want to absolutely minimize body fat gain, maximize muscle gain. Now, caveat here is when you're in a surplus, you're always going to store a certain amount of fat, particularly from, if you're at 9, 10, 11, 12%, going up in weight, you're going to store some body fat. But that's not all bad. Body fat is not a bad thing at all, because it is an essential resource of the body. It's going to help you be stronger. It's going to help the body actually transport nutrients around in a more efficient way so that you can gain what you can from the nutrients in terms of protein, in terms of the micronutrients, in terms of just being generally healthy. But what I'm trying to say is expect to not be shredded 24/7 if you want to gain muscle. You can do it. You can stay shredded 24/7, but you will live a life of misery and you will be crying into your tissue every single night because you can no longer produce cum. Going a bit off topic, but being in a shredded state below 10% body fat, or aiming for that all year round, is just not maintainable. There's only a certain amount of people, a very, very rare amount of people that can do that. And even then, those people will be the first to kind of show you how sort of regimented and disciplined their routine is. I mean, I can do it and I have done it in the past, but without realizing, I was so anal and disciplined over my food, over my socials, over training, that I missed out a big part of my early 20s because I was so damn obsessed. And at the same time, I didn't gain a lot of muscle because I wasn't feeding my body enough. I wasted probably about 5 to 6, 7 years of training Maybe not that much, but at least 5 years I could have done a lot better there. So a lean bulk, going back to it, is gaining as much lean mass as possible and as little body fat as possible. So it is not an excuse to eat absolutely everything. It's still controlled. You're still being strategic. You're still being patient. Not even more patient now, because body fat, you can cut a load of body fat in a matter of days, a matter of weeks. There's no fast track to building muscle, and I'm not going to promote going on steroids, because that will fast track, of course. But even then, even if you are on steroids, it's not going to be a complete, in 2 weeks you're going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You have to be committed to the journey. And if you speak to any person, any fitness coach, reputable fitness coach who, think, wow, they're in amazing shape, you've been following them for ages, you admire their physique, they have, I have to say, at least, unless they are an absolute anomaly, they have been training hard and dieting well for at least 5 years, at the very least. Me, myself, I've been training and in this world for 14, 15 years, and that's without skipping much of a beat. Yes, it's not all been focused on hypertrophy training. There has been a lot of sports and other styles of training within the mix. But what I'm trying to say is, a physique like mine, a physique like any other people you probably look up to, it doesn't happen overnight, and you have to remain patient. So what it actually means then is you have to be in a slight calorie surplus. So what I mean by slight is you're looking, no more than 500 calorie surplus, no less than 250 calorie surplus to see those muscle gains. And that's why we're saying minimal fat. If you increased from 500 to 1,000 surplus, your muscle mass isn't going to grow any faster, but your fat mass will. Because that extra energy, we can only basically utilize a certain amount of protein, a certain amount of calories to actually build muscle, and use productively for the body. The other excess is just going to be stored as body fat for later use. Again, going back to sort of ancestors, that's what we needed to do. Cold winters were coming in. We didn't have clothes. We didn't have houses. We were just naked people running around and fucking and hunting, and that's about it. But nowadays, we've got food in abundance, and that's why so many people are overweight, because of our sort of instincts and our natural responses to food, but the environment is no longer natural. So what can you expect for progress? Okay, so beginners, this is the newbie gain era. This is where you maximize muscle gain. This is the most exciting part of any training journey, particularly if you are in your late teens, early 20s. You're going to see your body in the first 2 years absolutely blow up. All right, so your beginners, you can expect to gain 0.1 to 1 kilo of muscle per month. Intermediates, so that's people who've been training for over a year, up to maybe 3 to 4 years. Maybe some inconsistency in there. You can expect to 0.25 to 0.5 kilos per month. And the advanced, the ones who've been grinding for years, hardly skipped a beat. 5 years plus experience of hard training, hard dieting. Unfortunately for us guys, we can expect the slowest gains at 0.1 to 0.25 kilos per month of muscle. And that's just how it is. We've got to live with it, and we've got to work hard to get those percentages. All right, so moving into food to lean bulk. So you might see a lovely juicy chicken here in the picture, and this is the premise of your meals. You can see a good source of protein. You've got your carbohydrates in the potatoes there, plenty of greens along the side as well. And that is a great representation of what your meal should look like. Maybe not as big, because if you're eating a whole chicken every single meal, as good as the protein is, you're going to be gaining fat. All right, unless you are half for Bjornsson, or you are, a 9-foot monster, then I wouldn't advise eating a whole chicken every single meal. But the premise is a good source of protein, good source of carbohydrates, plenty of vegetables. Just because you're in a bulk, sorry, I think I've got a bogey in my nose, and it's really annoying. Protein though, isn't it? Jokes. So yeah, if you're thinking about basically the meals and how they change from a cup, I just want you to think about them just growing in size. You add a few more carbohydrates, you add a little bit more protein, you add a few more vegetables. It shouldn't change. It shouldn't look like all of a sudden pizzas, burgers, ice cream, because then you're just going to get fat. Yes, okay, you might think you're eating protein because pizza has, a Domino's pizza on average probably has like 50 to 60 grams of protein, but it's shit. It's not very good quality protein, and we have to always bear in mind, good quality food, high nutrients, not only is it going to make us look better, But the most important thing is how is it going to make us feel? How is it going to make us perform? And whole food is going to, hands down, win that battle every single time. Now, where it comes into play with the flexibility is what I'll get to more so in the training and lifestyle. But imagine now we're still following the 80-20 rule, but instead of being on 2,000 calories, we're now on 3,000 calories. So that 20% has actually increased from, quick maths here, 400 calories to now 800 calories where we can use for pretty much what we want. So it's pretty much doubled in the, no, not 800, 600 calories we can use for what we want. So we've added 200 calories of freedom, basically, and that's where you get the flexibility from. It doesn't then become a 20-80 whole food to treats, because like I say, that's not going to benefit you. You've already been there. You've already looked like Father Christmas at the end of Christmas period. Let's not do it again. Okay, so how the food maybe looks a little bit different now is your protein actually, in ratios, is probably going to come down a little bit compared to your lean, your cutting phase, and your carbohydrates are going to increase. The simple reason being is that your body can then distribute pretty much all the protein resources to building muscle, and then it can basically utilize the carbohydrates for all the energy. Plus, if you're giving your body more energy, that means you can put more intensity into your training as well. So the carbohydrates are simply there as, if in simple terms, as a buffer to make sure that the body isn't using any of the protein or as little of the protein as possible for its energy resources. Then, of course, the vegetables are going to provide us with the micronutrients needed to make us and help us feel good, feel healthy, and provide us with all the good stuff that we maybe overlook when it comes to just macro diets. Okay, and of course, a good source of fat in there as well. So within this one, you've got the chicken skin, you've got the chicken juices, whole fat dairies, yogurts, things like that as well are going to help us. But you've got the ratios or the sort of guidance here. Obviously, the bigger you are, the more you're going to need. You've got 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo, carbs 3 to 6 grams per kilogram. But this will heavily depend on your type of training. For example, someone who is traditional gym training, once 4 to 5 times a week, you're probably not going to need more than someone who is maybe doing the same, but also doing CrossFit or High Rocks or a more, let's say, higher heart rate exercise or training modality, that they're obviously going to need more carbohydrates to fuel those sessions. So you're going to have to sort of work out based on your activity levels as well. And that will come with a bit of a trial and error process. But of course, that's what the coaches are here for. If you need a bit of extra help, just hit me up and I can assist you in that way. So key habits to make sure that we're not basically going and to turn ourselves into round fat balloons by the end of our bulk. Key habits, so track the calories weekly. I always like to recommend this at any point there's a change in the diet. All right, so if you are changing your diet, especially from a cut to a maintenance to a bulk, for the first couple of weeks, and I do this personally as well, even though I'm 14, 15 years in the game, track your calories so you know where you're at, so you know how to basically manage this, and you're not, again, going overboard or underdoing yourself and not feeding yourself enough, which is often a problem I do when I go into a bulk. Again, touching on that 80-20 rule, eat mostly whole, nutrient-rich foods. Don't stay away from donuts. Don't stay away from pizza. But just like you did in the cut, minimize them. Use them as treats. Use them as a little bit of a reward for your hard work. Stay consistent, not perfect. Always, always, always the case. All right. So again, that's where I say you can add a little bit more flexibility into the mix. It doesn't have to be absolutely bang on. But if your macros are looking pretty consistent over the course of 7 days, then you're going to see results and the results that you want to see. Training and lifestyle. Okay, so how does training actually look? Now, going into a lean bulk, you've got more food in the system. You've got more energy. This is where you should really ramp up the training because there is now the resources and the fuel behind it to fuel that progressive overload, to aim to lift more in your sessions. And remember, it's not always about lifting more weight. It could be time under tension. It could be reduced rest time. Personally, though, the funnest measure, shall we say, is that even a word? Funnest? Most enjoyable measure is gaining weight. Of course, that is the point of the bulk. We want to get stronger. We want people in the gym to look at us in awe and think, man, that guy looks like Thor. He is strong as an ox. No one wants to be the guy who people look at and think, yeah, he's a beginner, he's weak as a kitten, damn, he can't even lift 50 kilos. Oh, all these bad thoughts are coming back to my head. But yeah, anyway, we want to be the strong person. All right, so this is what training is about now. It's about focusing on getting stronger, lifting more, progressing. And with that is going to come the muscle gain. So again, in terms of the format, it doesn't necessarily change much from your cut. You know, training and if we're training for physique, hypertrophy training should always be and resistance training should always be the priority because that is what is going to change the body. Of course, speaking to the masses, you might get involved in running, you might be a CrossFitter, you might be someone in high rocks, you might be a powerlifter, you know, actually aiming to lift as heavy weight as possible. You have to account for your sport, for your enjoyment, for what you're actually aiming for, and your goals to actually build this. But let's just talk about it from a physique point of view, because most people just want to look good. We want 3 to 6 structured sessions weekly. Now, for the average person, 6 is probably a bit too many. I wouldn't go as much as 5. Give yourself 2 rest days, spread them out through the week. You want to keep the intensity high, okay? Making sure, like I say, intensity, lifting heavy weights, taking things to failure. This is where you can really push the body because you've got the fuel in the system. Now, when it comes to lifestyle, I touched on, you know, some of the more flexibility that we can bring into play with the food side of things, which is obviously going to open a door to you enjoying more socials. If you like a beer like me, and if you're a Brit and you don't like beer, then get the fuck out of Britain. But I'm only joking. Anyone who doesn't want to drink, it's your own choice, but you are a boring cunt. Have a drink. You know, you've got a little bit more flexibility to have a drink. Arnold Schwarzenegger loved a beer after his training sessions. You know, fact check that, but I'm pretty sure it's true. But yeah, sleep is super, super important now. Probably even more so than when you're in a cut because you are now trying to build muscle. You need the body to maximize its rejuvenation phase, which is sleep. So think of sleep as your natural steroid, your growth hormone. That is where these things are produced. So if you ain't sleeping, you ain't growing. Keep daily steps moderate. So what I mean by this is, and this, you know, falls into the same line as category. Again, going back to the energy distribution, as long as we're sort of managing our diet properly, we also need to manage our activity properly. And we don't want to take too much of our distribution resources away from the muscle building phases. So, of course, daily movement and keeping those numbers fairly high is always going to be positive, not only for, you know, burning extra calories, but more so for posture, for, you know, just keeping yourself moving, and, you know, just keeping yourself fit basically. But we also don't want to be, you know, doing 20,000 plus steps a day if we're trying to build muscle, unless we are, you know, on a super, super high calorie diet. You know, again, it all fits in together. So we have to manage and we have to monitor your activity levels, and that will give you then your required calorie amounts. And manage stress. Again, if you are stressed from work, stressed from, you know, family, stressed from anything, that is going to play a factor in your recovery process. And of course, training is a stressor as well. So what I would advise, if you are going through a particularly stressful time at work, in your personal life, wherever, take a little bit of intensity out of your training. You don't have to stop because, like me, it's a great stress reliever. But if we're taking it to the point where we're really fucking ourselves in the ass when it comes to training, and that's not a good place to be in a lot of the time, then it's only going to add more misery to the pile, and that asshole is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and more painful. Balance heavy weight training with recovery, because that is where the muscle is built. So you don't actually build muscle when you're training. That you're breaking muscle down. So again, something I learned the hard way is training more doesn't necessarily mean building more. You have to give adequate amount of rest time and resources for your body to recover and to get stronger, to get bigger, to get faster. Let's go. All right, so that's training and lifestyle. Boom. Avoid these to avoid fat. All right, so the common mistakes: overeating. Like I say, just seeing the bulk as, fuck it, I'm going to eat whatever, whenever, wherever I can. It's never going to work. Because when you do that, I can guarantee the amount of food or the amount of processed and, you know, unhealthy foods, let's put it into that category, that come into play is going to be more than 20%. All right, I can pretty much guarantee if you go in with that sort of very loose attitude, because you're not going to sit there and actively make yourself 2 extra meals a day, but someone hands you, a bag of crisps, a packet of biscuits, you ain't just having one, you're having the whole damn thing. So just be careful there. Skipping cardio. It hurts recovery and insulin sensitivity. All right. So don't skip your cardio and don't skip steps overall. All right. I think maybe you have to find a balance. Again, like myself, I do CrossFit and I do a bit of high rocks and things like that. That is that's part of the game. That's part of what I'm aiming for. So if you have those goals, then of course you have to balance it in and fuel properly. But from a muscle building point of view, if you can really minimize any activity anywhere else and just keep it for zone 2, if not less training, walking is more than enough, then great, you're going to maximize that recovery and muscle growth. Guessing your calories. So again, this comes to sort of links into that first point. Just sort of going in with that attitude is I don't care, I'm just going to eat and get big. If you're sort of guessing your calories, I can guarantee going from a cut into a bulk, you're going to be way out of sync. Like even in excess of 500 calories, maybe even 1,000 calories. It really, really is hard to tell when you're not tracking, because not only is it hard to do your maths on the spot, but I can guarantee if I asked you what you had for your dinner 2 days ago, you'll struggle to remember. Or if I ask you to list everything, you'll forget something. You'll forget that handful of nuts. You'll forget the couple of biscuits that you had round at your mum's. You'll forget the chocolate dildo you had with your boyfriend. Or is that just me? I'm not gay. I just let's move on. But anyway, yeah, you've got to kind of track, particularly at the first couple of weeks. That's always my recommendation. If you're being inconsistent in your training, but you're still being consistent in inhaling a load of fucking calories, then my God, you are going to get fat. And that muscle is not going to grow. So something to be aware of there. If you ain't consistent in your training, you're not going to see the progression that you want to. The size that you put on is going to be around the waist and the belly, not in the arms and not in the shoulders, not in the chest. You have to be patient, because if you are expecting to see results after 1 month, even after 2 months, then you're going to be disappointed. You have to see and sort of work through. You have to put the time in. There's no fast tracking this process. Yeah, okay, you might see these photos online, 12-day transformations or something ridiculous like that. I can guarantee the guy's just probably took a photo of himself in different lighting, tensed versus non-tense, bloated versus non-bloated, and now he looks like he's stacked on pounds and pounds of muscle. But that's the process. When you cut and when you unveil the muscle mass that you have underneath, you look way more muscular. So you have to always have that belief in your head that you are in it for the long game, you are doing the right things, you are measuring performance over just the way you look. And I promise, if you can be consistent over months, over years, you will become the person, you'll become the physique that you're looking to do. All right, dude. Now, last slide. When is the best time to bulk, and some takeaway points? All right, so it doesn't really matter. There isn't a really best time. It depends on your schedule. Now, I'm talking from a UK calendar now, but for more structure, fewer distractions, the fact that you're wearing more clothes, you can be a bit more comfortable with yourself, gaining some weight. I think the autumn winter is a great time to bulk. Not only that, but you've got the holiday season, all right? So there's more excuses that you're going to be eating more food. So no one wants to do the festive period in a cut, because if you are doing, then my God, I bet you slit your wrist every single day when you smell those mince pies and chocolate logs. Boom. So that would be my suggestion. Just look at your calendar. When do you want to be lean for? Look at holidays, look at trips, look at times of the year. When do you not mind being a little bit rounder? When do you want to get stronger for? When are you needing to perform for? All these things have to come into play. Post-cut or post-competition, body is primed to grow. So yeah, this is what I always do with clients who come on board. If you are not already, below 15%, then I'm going to take you down to a point where your body is, pretty much not depleted, but we've removed any excess body fat. We're looking nice and lean. We've got a nice muscular definition. At this point now, the body's primed to store more muscle than fat, because there's less fat in the body. Plus, you can see the results much clearer because there's less fat hiding the muscle growth as well. And okay, so how does this fit into the bigger picture? A lean bulk builds the muscle foundation. So pretty simple, you're building lean muscle. So every lean bulk, you're sort of adding, let's just imagine you are a statue. You're bringing the blocks, you're bringing the building materials to the statue, and you're sort of just placing them there. They don't look beautiful, they don't look pristine, they don't look chiseled. When you go into your cut, that's when the chiseler comes out. That's when you kind of get into artistic mode and really, really chisel down to unveil the definition within the body. So that's pretty much it. Takeaway points are, the lean cut and the bulk shouldn't look too different in its foundations. The best thing to do with your meals is just multiplying what you're already having. Don't overcomplicate things. You might want to make a few swaps with, you might take out some lean proteins for some fattier proteins. You might start to add things like oils to your meals to, increase the, amount of calories you're able to get in. You might also change, your dairies from maybe low fat to full fat. These little changes can definitely help you if you are someone who struggles to eat enough in a bulk to eat more without adding more volume. But overall, if you manage the lean bulk like you would with the same discipline, the same commitment, the same focus as you did with your cut, you're going to stay lean, you're going to stay in shape, you're going to look athletic, you're going to perform well. And when it comes to your next cut, my God, it's going to be a hell of a lot easier because you haven't got to shift that tire around your belly, those kilos and kilos of fat. You're already lean. Now it's just about chiseling from that point. Anyway, that is lean bulking for dummies. I hope you had a great lesson in how not to get fat when you're building muscle. If you want to hear anything more from me, then of course just join my school community if you're not already there. All the videos are also on YouTube. And if you want to get coached by myself, then I am now taking on clients to get coached, to get in the best shape of their life, and to live with freedom, happiness, and fitness. Let's get it. Booyah!